Hello, everyone. Welcome to a webinar hosted by the Object Management Group and Trizotech titled BPMN, CMMN, and DMN, the Triple Crown of Process Improvement Standards. We thank you all for attending today. We move on to the next chart. Here we go. My name is Tracy Berardi. I'm Senior Marketing Manager with the OMG, and I'll be moderating the presentation. I'm joined by my colleagues, Claude Boudoir, owner and principal of Save IT and Knowledge Management and Energy Domain Consultant to the OMG, as well as Denis Gagné, CEO and CTO of Trizotech and chair of the BPMN Interchange Working Group at the OMG. I'll start by telling you a little bit about the OMG and our work. The OMG is an international open membership not-for-profit technology standards consortium. We were founded in 1989. Our mission is to develop technology standards that provide real-world value for vertical markets, from automotive, business, finance, and healthcare, to insurance, security, space, and the industrial Internet of Things. And as you can see from this slide, the OMG has focused on middleware platforms, modeling platforms, systems assurance, and vertical domain specifications. The standards, including the ones we're talking about today, are freely available on OMG's website. That's www.omg.org, as you see on this chart. The OMG has a strong relationship with ISO, and many OMG standards also become ISO standards. The OMG brings together its international membership to develop and revise standards as technologies change over the years. On this chart, you see just a quick snapshot of some of those organizations. And we encourage folks on the call today to consider joining the OMG or signing up for email updates if you're interested in writing or tracking the progress of the standards. We're going to have time for Q&A at the end of the presentation, so if you'd like to submit questions, we encourage you to do so. There's a questions tab at the top of the screen. You can do that at any point. That would be great. And with this brief introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Claude to talk about the BMI working group, which created the modeling standards we're talking about today. So thank you, Claude, and thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Tracy. This is Claude Boudoir here, and I am actually one of the co-chairs of the Business Modeling and Integration Task Force. The way the OMG works is we have a number of task forces as well as special interest groups. And we have two technology committees, one called the Domain Technology Committee, which focuses on vertical domains and things that relate to the use and application of standards to the user community. And we have a platform technology committee that focuses on middleware and the technology standards, communication protocols, real-time, etc. The way the OMG works is that the task forces are responsible for defining a roadmap that will lead to standards that may be new standards or updates of existing standards. And because of the open process of the OMG, the task forces do not write the standards themselves. Instead, they issue requests for proposals so that the members of the OMG can come in and submit a proposal for a specification that would meet the requirements set forth in the RFP. The task force then reviews the specifications, discusses them with the submitters if there are multiple submitters, steers the process of potentially getting the submissions revised and sometimes combined. At the end of the process, which lasts a relatively short time for a standards organization, we're talking about 2 years, sometimes 3, and sometimes less, compared to 6 or 7 years for a group like ISO. We recommend adoption to the OMG Technical Committee, to the Architecture Board, which ensures the consistency of all the specifications, and to the OMG Board of Directors, which verifies the viability of the proposals made by the OMG members to fulfill the specifications. The Business Modeling and Integration, or BMI Task Force, which I co-chair, has a number of specifications that it adopted over the years, and there are basically 7 specifications that are very current. They were all adopted or revised between 2013 and 2016, and the 3 in the middle are the ones that we're going to talk about today, but we also have a business motivation model, or BMM, now version 1.3, which defines goals and objectives of organizations. The semantics of business vocabulary and business rules, which is about understanding the language contained in business documents. And the 3 specifications we're going to talk about today: the business process model and notation, BPMN, the case management model and notation, CMMN, on which Denis Gagné actually worked recently to update it to version 1.1, the decision modeling notation, DMN, and then the value delivery modeling language adopted last year, and the date and time vocabulary adopted a couple years ago. So that provides the introduction to the work we're doing, and I will now turn it over to Denis Gagné to talk about the triple crown of those 3 standards.
Thank you, Claude. Good day, everybody. I'm Denis Gagné, as introduced by Tracy and Claude, and I'd like to talk to you about BPMN, CMMN, and DMN. I participated in the preparation of all these standards, and we'll try to give you a quick overview of what these standards are about and how you can use them within your organization. So in today's world, organizations are trying to transform into digital enterprises. And in doing so, they are adopting all kinds of new technology like mobile, cloud, big data, Internet of Things. And by adopting all these technology, they want to remain focused on their process centricity, customer centricity, knowledge centricity, and innovation centricity. While doing this transformation to a digital organization, these enterprises want to use all the different stakeholders that they have at their disposal, including business executive and line managers, enterprise and business architects, business analysts, and process analysts. And all these different stakeholders come to the table with a different perspective, different knowledge, and different bias as to how things should be done. I'm providing you here with some context from Gartner that looks at different types of work effort, or use cases, if you want to call them that, with respect to whether the workflow is structured or unstructured, or the data is structured and unstructured. And as you can see, depending on the different type of combination of structured workflow and structured data, you get different use cases that make more use of one type of work effort than others. So we have in the orange the service type requests that are usually very workflow heavy and more prescriptive in how things happen. And you have in the red the process to decision, and in the green the incident and more collaboration type of event, and the investigative type of use cases. So you can see that in the top right corner you have very unstructured workflow and very unstructured data or information that is used to carry out these different work efforts or use cases. Now, as your organization try to improve its work efforts, there's different methodologies and frameworks and approaches that support this improvement work. Now, what I'm presenting on the board right now is what we call the Devil's Quadrant. And basically what this is presenting is the conflict that happens when we're trying to optimize quality, time, value, and cost. So usually as we're trying to provide more quality, we'll incur more costs to prepare the quality. And as we try to provide more value, it will take more time. So therefore, when we're trying to optimize, there's a tug of war between all these different perspectives that we have to look at. Traditional or contemporary methodologies and approach pick one focus in particular. For example, those of you interested in Six Sigma will usually have more interest in providing quality and shorter time. People interested in the lean perspective will usually look at providing value at a lower cost, eliminating all the waste that are present in the work. Now, when we've looked at traditional structured workflow of business process management, we've usually focused on improving time and cost, so very much more focus on throughput and reducing costs, where when we're tackling more of what's considered unstructured workflow, or often referred to as case management, or the unstructured workflow, then we're looking at adding more value and quality by depending more on the knowledge workers to provide us with that balance in doing the work effort. So what are BPMN, CMMN, and DMN? As presented, BPMN stands for the Business Process Model and Notation, where CMMN stands for the Case Management Model and Notation, and DMN stands for the Decision Model and Notation. What these are really, they're languages to describe your operation or your work efforts. They're really just a means to an end. You don't get anything or any answers free from these languages, but they do provide you the tooling you need to improve and increase your efficiency and effectiveness. So why would you use BPMN, CMMN, or DMN? Basically, all these are standards that provide you with an unambiguous format for modeling processes, case, and decision. And it can be interchanged between different vendor products. So it provides us with a common notation and a common file format that tools can interchange. So more importantly, what this means is that you have readily transferable skills that becomes available. Because as people get trained and learn BPMN, once they know the language, they can move from organization to organization and still apply that same language. And the same is valid for CMMN and for DMN. And what that means is that your knowledge doesn't walk out the door with the individual people or your subject matter expert, as if it's captured in BPMN, you can find other resources that have been trained generally in the market to come and replace them and understand what's been documented in your operations. So when should you use BPMN, CMMN, or DMN? And the name says it. Basically, in the name you have the answers. BPMN is about processing, so it's more prescriptive in describing how things should be done, where CMMN is more about managing, and it's about managing a context. In particular case, the case is the context here that we're talking about, and DMN is about deciding. So in a very simple way, the name of the standard guides you to when to use them for different situations. So a little bit more on when to use BPMN, CMMN, and DMN, a little bit based on what I was talking about on the Gartner chart before, is you have different types of work effort. You have from variable to emergent work effort. And you can see that when you have variable situation, that is, that every instance of the work is slightly different from the other, then BPMN is very powerful at doing this, as it will prescribe what to do in general and what to do in case of exceptions. When you start going into the unpredictable section, where the exact course is unknown and may highly different from situation to situation, then BPMN start being a little bit more cumbersome in specifying all the possible alternatives that may happen. So we start using CMMN, where in CMMN we're really managing a context and explaining or defining how to react to different events that are happening. So the emergent aspect of the workflow is better handled with CMMN, where the exact course is not known in advance and things are just happening as we go. Now DMN, the decision model portion, can be used in all these different situations. And DMN can be used in conjunction with BPMN or in conjunction with CMMN to provide the decision-making aspect into those two ways of capturing the work effort. So we've already mentioned a little bit, BPMN is basically a standard from OMG. It's a universal graphical notation that allows you to draw business process, so it's both a notation, but it's also a file format to interchange between the different tools. And it's something that is readily available and understandable to both business people and technology people. And its aim is really to close that gap between business and IT. The current standard of BPMN is version 2.0, and it's available on the OMG website. And this particular version is also an ISO standard, accepted ISO standard. Now, BPMN is quite simple at the core. There's only really 4 shapes you need to know to understand BPMN at the basic level. So whenever you see a circle in BPMN, you're in the presence of an event. So we're talking about an event. Whenever you see a rounded rectangle, rounded corner rectangle, we're talking about an activity. And whenever you see a diamond, this is what we call a gateway. And it's a branching point in the process flow. And then we have the arrow that will define the flow. So those are the basic core elements of BPMN. And in a sense, they're all you need to know to start understanding a BPMN diagram. And we'll see that we can add all kinds of other markers and decorators to better specify how things should be done. But at the core, it's always these same basic elements that are reused. And the standards, both BPMN, CMMN, are very consistent in their uses of the shape. So whenever you see something that is wrong, it's always about an event. And whenever you see a rounded corner rectangle, it's always about an activity. And whenever you see a diamond, it's always about a branching moment or decision. So now that you're equipped with that basic knowledge of BPMN, we can look at a BPMN diagram and start understanding what's going on. So you see on the far left there's a circle, which is a start event, that basically says the process starts there. And in BPMN, you prescribe how things should happen. So you specify what's the next step, what's the next thing that will happen. So you can see the flow is telling me that after the event of the start of the process, there's a task to be completed, a generic task that I put there. Once this task is completed, then I move on to another task because it's a rounded rectangle, rounded corner rectangle. And now there's a marker that says that this is a decision task. So this little table is a marker that indicates that this is a particular type of task that is about a decision. And then once that task is completed, I move to a gateway, which based on that decision, I will take either one of the 2 branches. So in this case, a gateway without a marker means it's an exclusive gateway, so I have to choose either the top branch or the bottom branch. Now, taking the bottom branch takes me to a service task that requires a certain data information as its input, and then that branch can end into the end event, which is a thicker border circle. So again, circle always means that it's an event. Thin circle is a start event. Thick circle means it's an end event. If I take the upper branch, then I see that I have another task, which is a case task, in which a case is defined. Once this case is completed, then I move to an event. Now, this double circle event is what we call an intermediate event. So it's an event that happens in the course of the process. And here it's saying that I'm waiting to receive a message from another participant, a customer potentially, or a partner. And then once I receive the message, then I can carry on to complete that process. So those are the basic, very simple core element of BPMN. It's a simple prescriptive description on how things should be done, and it allows you to define alternative paths like I've done with a branching here, and there's also a way to show alternative paths that are in reaction to certain events. Now, what is CMMN? CMMN is another standard. It's a sister or brother standard to BPMN, and it's about case management. And in CMMN, again, we have a visual notation and a file format to interchange between tools. The aim here is to model things that are not predefined at the start of the situation. So the work effort cannot be completely prescribed when initiated. CMMN is in its current version at CMMN 1.0, available on the OMG website, and there's also a beta CMMN 1.1 version that is available currently and should be approved in the next few weeks. So in CMMN, very similar to BPMN, we have some visual basic shapes that provides us with an understanding of what this model means. So we have the notion of a stage, which is this rectangle with the chopped corners, and that means that there's a particular, I'm in a particular context. We have again the notion of a task, just like in BPMN, and we have the notion now, another notion, which is a discretionary task, which is depicted with dashed line. This means that it's a task that we don't always do, that we sometimes do at a certain discretion. Now again, we have this double line circle, again the circle meaning events, and we have the little document style folded lip for what we call case file items or information items that are in the case file. And then we have the milestone, which is presented by this ellipse style icon. Now in CMMN, rather than prescribing the sequence of how things happen, we're presenting declarative statements. So that means that we're just basically stating how to react. And we use what we call an event condition action semantic or expression. So basically, you can see depicted at the bottom there, on a certain event, if that event happens, if a condition is met, which is my dashed line with the little diamond, then do this action. Now, CMMN is very powerful and allows you to define these type of situations with an event, with a condition, or with or without condition and event. So you can have ECA, or you can just have EA, or you can just have CA, or just A on its own. That means that we always do it. So you can in a very strong way, define how to react to situation. So what I have here is a CMMN model, a simple CMMN model. And you see that in this CMMN model there, I have what we call the case plan model. And the case plan model is basically my context. So this folder shape notation there means that when I'm within this context, so this particular context, how do I react to different events and what's going on? So you can see that if I take you to the far right, there's an event there that is a user event, and it's linked to a condition and a dark point. So what this is saying is that while I'm within this context of this case, at any time, if I get this user event and the condition is met, I can close the case. So I don't have to prescribe every time or everywhere this is possible to escape from the case or complete the case. This can happen anytime. And you can also see just under it, there's another statement or another model portion that says if a certain milestone is reached and I have this particular data information in the folder, I can also close the case. Now, on the left side, we have something that says at a particular time, if a condition is met, then do this action. And this is a user action, and the exclamation point on it means that this is a required action. And then at the end of the dashed line, the dashed tasks that are there, those are discretionary tasks. That means that while I'm doing this mandatory or required task, I also have the option of doing other tasks that are manual or user-based or even a process task. So I can call upon a process to be involved. And then at the bottom, you see that I have another dashed activity that is not linked to anything, and that basically says that at any time during the context of this case, I can, at my discretion, do that particular task. And to the right, there's this task, which is a decision task, that says that within the context of this task, this case, I can do this decision task. So CMMN allow you to, in a very concise way, present how to react to different events, whether they're user-based events, time events, or reacting to new information coming into the case file, which is often the situation where in some kind of investigating or claim validation situation, and CMMN allow you to express this in a very concise and powerful way. Now, the next standard that we want to talk about briefly is DMN. DMN is the decision model annotation. And DMN, again, provides you with a visual notation to describe and present the requirement for your decision, but also allow you to specify the decision logic. That is, how will this decision be made very precisely. Again, you have both the notation and you have the file format interchange that is available with DMN. DMN 1.0 is the active version that is available on the OMG website, and DMN 1.1 is currently in beta and also available on the OMG website. Now in DMN, again, we have some very simple shape that help us understand what the diagram means. And basically we have a decision. A decision is the square corner rectangle. We have the inputs, which are these ellipse shape. Then we have business knowledge models, which are encapsulated decisions that are in that chopped corner type of rectangle. And we have the knowledge source, which are the sources or resources on which we rely to make our decision. And then we have different types of connectors to express the decision requirement. So we have an information requirement, which is this full arrow. We have a knowledge requirement, which is the dash with an arrow. And we have the authority requirement, which has the dash with a point at the end. So those are the basic shapes for defining decision requirement in DMN. So let's look at an example together. So now I have a very simple DMN diagram, and the top portion is basically giving me a decision, and you see that it has an information requirement of another decision and a decision requirement of a certain input. And the sub-decision there got an information requirement of an input 1 and input 2, and input 2 is based upon a certain knowledge authority. So that could be a regulation, a law, or rule, or a specific procedure within the organization or decision on which this input is sourced. So you can basically express here how you come to a decision. So this main decision is based on another decision, which itself is based on 2 inputs, and one of this particular input rely from a certain rule or regulation that we have to apply. Now, what we've shown there also is the decision logic of that second level decision, and we've expressed it here with a decision table. And the decision table basically provides the full exact logic on how to make that decision. And you can read the decision table very simply, where each row is seen as a rule and each column is seen as an input, and then you have the output. So it basically says that if input 1 is true and input 2 is true, then my output is true, and et cetera, et cetera. And you can read the different rules, and you can specify much more complicated logic and decision there. Now, DMN also has a more powerful expression language for defining the decision logic, which is called FEEL. But today in this introduction level, we won't go into that, but the standard itself is strong enough to support very advanced decision making. So now that I've introduced all three of these standards, let me give you a little bit of differentiation between these different standards. So as we've seen, BPMN is about processes, where CMMN is about cases and DMN is about decisions. The first-class citizen of BPMN model are activities. So BPMN models are really about defining the sequence of the activities, where in CMMN, the first-class citizen are the events, whether they're document events or user events or timer events, and it's about how we react to these events within the case. Where in DMN, the decision is first-class citizen, the rules, and all those rules are helping us make the decision. Now, DMN is about transitioning from activities to activities, where CMMN is about reacting to events within a context, and DMN is about rule applied to specific information. Now, in BPMN, we will also capture data to help us within that transition of activities. In CMMN, we will use information, which is data in context. So if you take data in context, you have information. So in CMMN, we're dealing more with information. And if you take information and you apply it, then you obtain knowledge. So in DMN, we're working more with knowledge. Now, BPMN's got a procedural or prescriptive look of the world. That is, that it's saying how things should be done and prescribe how things should be done one after the other. Where in CMMN, we take a more declarative approach. That is, that it's just a series of independent statements on how to react. Where DMN is more functional, we provide it with knowledge and we obtain a decision. Now, the actual semantic or execution semantic behind these standards and those are more advanced topics here, but BPMN has a token execution semantic, where CMMN's got an event condition action execution semantic, and DMN's got a first order logic execution semantic. Now, some of the best practices are when should I know to switch from one language to another. So here are a couple of tattletale to help you find your way through. So if you've been using BPMN, and many of you may have been using BPMN for many years, as it is a more established standard, if you find yourself in a BPMN model or BPMN diagram where you have a lot of gateways that are connected into one another, then that's a clear sign that you should chop off that portion of interconnected gateways and turn them into a decision using DMN. So in BPMN, if you have a diagram with lots of gateways, there's probably room there to introduce portion of it and abstract them into a decision task, and then use DMN to describe the decision logic into that decision task. Now, another tattletale is if you're in a BPMN model or a BPMN diagram, and you have a lot of intermediate events, and you have a lot of events on boundary of task, there's a lot of branching out. So you're probably in a situation where you have to describe an awful lot of exceptions. So if you have a lot of these exceptions to your BPMN diagram, that's probably a good portion of your diagram that you want to chop off, abstract into a case task, and define that portion using the CMMN notation, which will be more efficient and more effective at defining how you react to events within that particular context. Now, another one of these best practices or rule, if you want, rule of thumb, if you're in BPMN and you're using ad hoc activities to describe what's going on or ad hoc sub-process, I would argue if you're using even one ad hoc sub-process, that should be interchanged with a CMMN type task or a case task and define that logic in CMMN. So as you matured with your BPMN modeling, you may find situation where it's very hard to describe this portion of the process using BPMN, and you end up having this box where you put ad hoc activities in there. That's certainly a good portion that you should abstract into CMMN. Another point of recognizing this situation is if you find yourself that a state diagram, a state transition diagram, would be a better way of capturing how things happen with your work effort, then that's another sign that you should be using CMMN. And at the end there I have, if you're in CMMN and now you find yourself modeling a lot of task interdependencies, so having tasks that are based upon the completion of the other task, if that condition is met, do this other task, then you're really trying to prescribe how things should be done using CMMN, and probably you should abstract that portion of your CMMN model as a process task and define this process task using BPMN. So hopefully I've given you a couple of hints on how to guide yourself as to which language to use to abstract the work effort that you're trying to model. Now, BPMN, CMMN, and DMN together provide you with the power to express the next generation of BPM. It provides you with agile, very adaptive, and leveraging your knowledge worker. It's also providing you with smart, intelligent, knowledge focus, and leveraging the business goal and the business rule of these operations that you're trying to capture. And it's also providing you with a contextual environment where your information is focused and you're leveraging the business events. Together, all these three languages provide you with all the powers you need to express all the various types of work effort that you may encounter in your organization. Now, I will pass back to Claude to provide us with a summary of this particular presentation.
Thank you, Denis. Appreciate that. I think that it was a great presentation, and I particularly appreciate, as I've had a chance to tell you before in some meetings we were in together, this demonstration of what are the things that when you try to do them in one notation and you encounter certain maybe slightly pathological aspects of the model, that tells you that maybe you should be using one of the other notations. And we will leave a lot of time for questions. We're doing good on time, and I can see that we already have a certain number of questions lined up. So let me conclude fairly rapidly. The work of that the OMG is doing has obviously been to evolve these three standards separately originally. I mean, the people who've been working on them are each aware of the other notations that are in this field. As Denis said, he's been working on all three, and some of us have definitely looked at how to make sure that when we developed CMMN, for instance, that we clarified why we had to do a separate standard from BPMN, and this is related to this issue of processes that are not prescriptive, etc. So now, the work that we're going to continue to do within the object management group is to continue to evolve these standards. As I said, or as Denis said, CMMN 1.1 just came out in beta form, and it's very close to actual adoption. And we can see a trend here, which is that CMMN 1.1 includes the ability to say, oh, and here I have a task in CMMN that actually is defined through a process model that could be done in BPMN. So we're starting to see the beginning of an integration a little bit between at least two of the standards, and therefore the things that are probably on our roadmap, and I say probably because as co-chair of the group, I don't decide what the roadmap is going to be. It's the members who work together on defining that, would be to sort of reciprocate and update BPMN, go to a version 2.x, in which we might allow a BPMN process model to call out to either a DMN decision model or to a CMMN case model in order to continue to better integrate the various notations. So that's what we are looking at in the area of BPMN, CMMN, and DMN. And then the Business Modeling and Integration Task Force has other things on its roadmap. Currently, the two key activities is we're working jointly with some other task forces on a potential business architecture meta model. So taking some of the lessons learned by the business architect community and understanding what is the meta model of all the concepts in business architecture, and that may leverage some of the other standards we have, including obviously the definition of processes, which are a business architecture concept, but also the business motivation model. And we also want to integrate risk. We have a standard for value modeling, but we don't have today a standard for risk modeling. There's one group working on mostly cyber threat and operational risks, and we want to expand this and go towards modeling business risks. So that's some of the activities we do and envision as being on our roadmap. And the reason I'm telling you that, which sort of drifts a little bit away from the specific topic of this webinar, is that this means you have opportunities to participate. So the call to action here is now that hopefully you understand a little bit better when and how to use BPMN, CMMN, and DMN, I would definitely encourage people to use them. And there is a variety of tool vendors out there that propose support for these notations in their tools and integrate the whole semantic model behind them with some of the other enterprise models. But of course, we would also love for you to get involved in the work of our task force. Our next meeting is going to be the week of June 20th. That's for all the OMG groups, but the BMI task force is going to meet mostly on Monday, June 20th. And if you're not yet an OMG member, we have a process where we can invite you and give you a guest pass. Even though you're not a member, you still have to pay for your travel and a limited fee for registration. But you can ask Tracy Berardi, and I put her email address there if you're interested in following up and finding out how you can participate in our work. So here's the conclusion slide. You can certainly look at Trisotech's website as a place where you can get more information about Denis' company and how they have implemented those standards. And you can certainly look at the OMG website to understand more about what we're doing. And with that, I'm going to ask Tracy to step back in and lead us through the questions that were asked by the audience so that we can address as many of them as possible in the remaining 17 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Claude. Thanks, Denis. We have plenty of questions that I'm going through right now. First question, and I'll read some of these verbatim. Are there scenarios where BPMN and CMMN can be used together?
Yes, in fact, that's the whole purpose. These standards were defined so that they can all work together. And as I mentioned in the presentation, you may want to define your process in BPMN and then have different portion of it or tasks that are calling a DMN decision or a decision specified in DMN, or that are calling a case reaction. So for example, I may have a roadside assistance process where, or a customer service process, a customer service process where one of the potential activity in my customer service is to start a roadside assistant case. So in this situation, we're mixing the process definition in BPMN, which is then calling a task that is itself described in CMMN, and in there may be a decision that is itself defined using DMN. So the standards are created so that different activities within each of them can be defined using the other, depending on what you're trying to express.
Perfect. Thank you. The next question, how can ontologies, light or heavyweight, be integrated into models?
Oh, yeah. That's a little bit of a deeper question than an introduction presentation, but basically you can use different ontologies to specify the language or the entities that you're manipulating in these models. And we can take that maybe on an email conversation or a separate conversation, but certainly there's the financial industry business ontology that is defined within the OMG, which is also can be used in manipulating the different elements, the data entities or the activities may be defined by ontologies centrally.
Sure. And maybe this is a good one for you, Claude, or both of you. The next question is, how do the other BMI standards relate to or complement the three standards that we walked through today?
That is actually a very good question, because this is part of the reason why we're starting to work on a meta model of business architecture. We've essentially identified that, yeah, we have a family of standards. I've mentioned 7 in the introduction slides, and we need to help people connect them better. So we need to model what are the concepts that exist in business architecture and how they relate to each other. So what is, where do processes connect to business motivation, for instance, and objectives? Can we say the purpose of a process is to achieve an objective, for instance, and that provides a connection. So the business architecture meta model, which is in its infancy right now, where we're still basically discussing scope, and we don't yet have an RFP ready, but we hope to have one later this year, is going to help provide the connectivity between several of these standards. It's clear, for instance, that the value delivery modeling language also has some connections to business processes, because it has activities in the value chain that create value. That goes without saying, but these activities have a close connection to process tasks in BPMN. So the answer is we don't have a clear, an extremely clear set of connections right now. If you were to use to model an entire enterprise, you would have today to develop a business motivation model, a value delivery model, some BPMN models. Maybe you would also do some other artifacts related to business architecture, like capability maps, and connect the processes to the capabilities and the capabilities to the business motivation. And the best you can hope today is that you use a tool that allows you to do all these models, provide some connections between them, not define things multiple times, but have some semantic integration between the various models. And we're working on this business architecture meta model to provide a more formal connection at the modeling level between those various things.
Okay. We have a lot of questions about tools. Can we talk a bit about tools that support representing BPMN, CMMN, and DMN in the same model, or any tools that cover, all three languages?
Yes, there are, and there's starting to be more and more. So, in fact, there's a very large collection of tools that support BPMN. It's been around for quite a few years more, so there's a very large collection, north of 200 different tools that we are aware of that implement BPMN. There's also a very large number of tools that are adopting CMMN and DMN. DMN's got already north of 15 or 20 tools that are implementing the standard. CMMN is more in around 10 to 20 tools that are working on implementing. And there are now starting to emerge a series of tools that implement all three standards in an integrated way. Trizotech being one of them. Our company does that. There's also Camunda that's doing all three, and there are more and more vendors that are looking at integrating all three different modeling language. Now, some vendors have all three in separate languages or in separate tool sets, like, for example, Oracle, IBM are also example of different tools that implements the three standards.
And Denis, could you give us some insight into what the investment, the cost of these tools is like?
Well, that varies an awful lot. I mean, in the good salesmanship, it depends. But generally speaking, you can find different tools. So some tools are simply for modeling, where you can create a model using one or all of the languages that we've talked about today. Other tools will allow you to not only model, but also execute. So each of these notation and language we presented today not only offer a notation or a diagramming capability and a file format interchange, but also present a execution semantic, so it actually describe how these should behave, these model and these diagrams. So some tools also implement the execution semantics. So depending on the scope of that, your pricing of the tool would be completely linked to that. So probably cheaper tool will do the modeling portion, and more expensive platform type of environment will do both the modeling and the execution.
Thank you.
I would also, this is Claude, I would also point out, be careful about tools that may be very cheap and or even free, but that will only do a diagram without really capturing the semantics of the model. You really want a tool that will have, where you will define things, and there will be a database containing the model behind the diagrams, because that's how you can export the content of the model, integrate it into another tool, or simply use the reports from the tool with tables listing the tasks, listing the actors, etc., and exploit that rich semantic model in order to do other things. These notations, of course, have a sort of compelling graphical front end, but a model is not just a pretty diagram.
Yes, that's a very important point, Claude. And we're seeing a lot of that, because as your organization start investing in capturing their knowledge using these languages, this is an investment that you want to ensure that is transferable and can be interchanged to different technology or reused in different contexts. For example, you may want to model something in one tool and go and execute it in another tool on a different platform. So ensuring that you have full support of interchange capability is a must to ensure your investment in the long term.
And we have a viewer here who's asking if we have any worked examples of each notation type.
Yes, in fact, there are different examples. So each of the spec documents themselves have worked out example or portion example that shows how to apply them and how to use them. So within the spec themselves, there are some examples. Although reading a spec is not necessarily what you want to promote to business end users, but there are also a series of books on the different standards. So there's books on BPMN, there's books on DMN, and there's a couple of books on CMMN or case management in general that are there that also provides worked out example. And most likely the different vendors, we certainly do at Trizotech, and I'm sure others do too, where you have different worked out example. In our particular case, given that we implement all three standards, we also have worked out example that interlinked all three different types of models together.
Thank you. Next question. We have a few minutes. The BPMN is a rich and almost complete notation standard that permits business process automation tools to interpret its symbols into system instructions. Do CMMN and DMN have this capability as well?
Yes, yes, exactly. Yes, all three languages or all three notation are built on the same core concept of a graphical notation, a structural meta model that defines how things are structured, and an execution semantic so that the machine can execute it in a very similar and exact same way. So you basically can take those diagrams and make them run on your system with the appropriate system that can do that. All three of them are built on the same general core idea.
And the next question is, the important part in BPMN compatible execution language BPML, are CMMN and DMN compatible with BPML, or are there their own execution languages? Do they have their own execution languages?
Well, just a small clarification. BML is no longer supported and is not an OMG standard. BML was an original standard idea that was defined in the BMI group, which was originally the parent group of BPMN. But BPMN moved on to OMG, and as it moved on to OMG, its own execution semantic was defined within BPMN. So BPMN 2.0 has its own execution semantic and doesn't rely on BPML or BPEL or any other languages for execution. It has its own execution definition, and so does CMMN and DMN.
Is there a plan to release a new version of BPMN? It looks like the last release date is 2011.
Yes, there's always effort going on about improving the different standards. In the case of BPMN, we're at the point now where we have a stable version. So it went through many different iterations in its youth, and now we have a stable version that covers most of the requirement of the market. So OMG always accept different issue reports or improvement reporting. And as these get cataloged in, then different effort, what we call revision task force, are put together to address the improvement that are needed to the different standards.
Thanks, Denis. There's a couple people asking about the slides, and I want to mention there's an attachments tab at the top of the screen, and there you will find today's presentation that you can download. There's also an overview of the OMG and our work, and some additional flyers, product flyers that you can check out. So that is in the attachments tab. We can take maybe one or two more questions. Let's see. Is there a standard way in DMN to describe the input required? I assume this is user input.
So yes, within a decision requirement diagram, you can specify which inputs are required for a particular decision. DMN does not specify how the actual data source is connected or providing that data information. But in your decision requirements, yes, you can specify what are the required input to a decision.
Thanks, and I'll send this one over to you, Claude, because I miss hearing you. Are you developing a standard for modeling integration, such as Enterprise Service Bus, ESBs?
So, I mean, ESBs are really not within the purview of this, this particular task force. OMG has worked on middleware before, starting with the Corba years, 25 years ago. At this point, we are not looking at actively at middleware standards that would be related to let's say, the orchestration of business processes. That would probably actually be in one of the platform task forces, not in the domain task force, but from an OMG perspective, I think reiterating what Denis said if a member comes and says, I think we should specify something, and there is room for standardizing some process of, let's say, orchestrating business processes at the level of a middleware integration, whether it be through web services or through an enterprise service bus, I think we would definitely consider that and try to find which task force could be the custodian of such a new standard and work on it. The OMG is a little bit like the famous Spanish inns. You know, you can sleep in there, but you have to sort of bring your own bedding. I mean, that's an old joke from the years when you had these rural inns where you could go there, but you had to sort of bring everything. You know, it was just a roof and a door. So I would invite people to email us and suggest things and try to attend one of our meetings and come with a use case or a business case for doing that, and then we will definitely consider it. At this point, there is no such work going on right now related to the notations that we've talked about today.
Great. Thank you both. I think we'll end it here. We just passed the top of the hour. And thanks again, everyone, for joining us. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact us through the OMG or Denis through TrizoTech. We'd be happy to help you. And have a great rest of the day. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.